Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Welcome to Layout Building. In this episode, I'm introducing the O-scale display layout that we're going to be building in our game room. It's going to be the home of my model of Santa Fe 3751. After a long time and a lot of work, our game room is nearing completion. There's still some trim work to do and the room needs flooring, but it's painted and we think it's looking pretty good so far. The train room next door still needs a lot of work, but meanwhile Nicole and I want to build a train layout near the ceiling in this room. The plan is to build a shelf below the soffit around the edges of the room to support the track. This is going to be a simple display loop with no turnouts, and we're doing it in 3-rail O-scale. In the process of remodeling this room, we ended up taking it down to bare studs. We demolished an old wall that divided the room in half, and Nicole and her mom helped put up new ceiling rafters. We completely replaced all the electrical and added a soffit around the edges of the room. We had a plan to do a display layout near the ceiling early on, and I even marked out the approximate location on the studs. While the walls were apart, I decided to build in some wires to carry power up to the track. To get the room finished, we hung new drywall, and Nicole and her mom also helped out with the painting. The banana plugs on the lower receptacle are wired to the corresponding plugs on the upper one. Eventually, we'll put in a countertop near the lower plugs where the train controller will sit. We put in a switch to control the upper outlet. Eventually we may use that to add some lighting around the track. The switch with tape over it is for a ceiling fan that hasn't been installed yet. Since the track layout is basically a squared off oval, the hardest part of planning the main line was figuring out how much Lionel Fastrack I needed. The curves are 0.72, which is the recommended minimum radius for my O-scale model of Santa Fe 3751. I also ordered quite a few 30-inch straight sections, along with some 10-inch straights, a couple terminal tracks, and a few shorter straight pieces. All of the track sections are just plain Fastrack. I didn't get any accessory or other special pieces. If I did my math right, I should have just enough curves and 30-inch sections to get around the room. The shorter pieces are in case I need to make any adjustments. I've made marks on the floor 8 inches from the wall, which represent the edge of the shelf, and put down a few pieces of track to see how it will fit. I chose 8 inches as the shelf width because it's a little narrower than the soffit on the sides of the room. It's wide enough to provide ample clearance on the sides of the track for the trains. I'll have to do something a little different with the curves in the corners, but we'll get back to that later. The combined height of the NMRA gauge and a piece of Fastrack is about 6 1/4 inches. I'll be using 3/4 inch plywood for the shelf. All of that adds up to a total of 7 inches. In order to make sure that I have enough vertical clearance for the trains, I need to position the brackets so that the top is at least 7 inches below the bottom of the soffit. The room is going to be used for a lot of other things besides the train, so I also want to keep the shelf as high as possible. I've set up my laser level to mark a line exactly 7 inches below the bottom of the soffit. I'm not planning to run double stacks on this, but I want to make sure that I have enough clearance for just about any train. You never know what kind of train we might want to run in the future. Nicole and I picked these brackets to support the train shelf on the sides of the room. I'm using a stud sensor to make sure that I screw the first bracket into wood. I'll put a small pencil mark near the laser line so I know where to drill. I can use the bracket to mark the screw locations. I'll use a bubble level to make sure that it's plumb. After putting up another bracket, I want to check my clearances. I don't always trust my math skills, so a practical test is a good idea. I've put a piece of scrap lumber across the brackets that's the same thickness as the plywood that I plan to use. Using a short piece of track and an NMRA gauge, I can see that there's good vertical clearance with an extra 1/4 inch of space at the top. Now it's just a matter of repetition to put up the remaining brackets on the sides of the room. The front of the room has French doors, so there won't be room under the shelf in that area for brackets. We're planning to hang some TVs in the back of the room, so we want to keep the area under the shelf in that area clear as well. I'm going to use these simple angle braces and mount them above the shelf in those areas. Using my scrap plank again, I've reset the laser level to be even with the top of the shelf. Now I can align the bottoms of the brackets with the laser line. I'm securing the brackets to the wall with lag screws. After the brackets are up, I'm painting them the same color as the wall. This should help to hide them, especially once the shelf is in place. I'm going to make the shelves out of this high-quality 3/4 inch oak plywood. This is the same type of wood that I used for the sub-road bed on our N-scale Siren Creek project layout. I also got some oak molding to finish off the front edges of the shelves. I'll use a circular saw with a guide attachment to rip 8-inch wide planks out of the 4x8 sheet of plywood. The cutting guide eliminates the need for measuring and ensures that all of the pieces will be exactly the same width. After cutting the straight shelves, I put one up on the brackets with some track and a boxcar to get an idea of how it will look. I think it's turning out pretty well. The corners are a little more difficult. I started by setting some track on a piece of plywood. All these lines are me trying to get fancy. After spending some time basically reviewing my high school geometry, I decided that this was a dead end. One of the more useful things I did with that time was to arrange a pair of 40-foot boxcars on the track as if they were a single car. I don't have any full-length passenger cars or 89-foot flats in O scale, but I want to make sure that I have clearance just in case. I'll mark a line with a pencil that represents the minimum clearance for longer cars. If I maintain my 8-inch shelf width through the curve, I should have plenty of room. To keep things simple, I'm using a homemade trammel to draw a curved cut line. After cutting, I'll give the wood a light sanding. This will get rid of splinters in my pencil marks. I'm going to use some of that oak molding on the outside edge. It's a little difficult to bend. I'm using yellow wood glue to attach the molding. It takes a lot of coaxing to get it to curve. Since I don't have enough clamps to do the entire corner at once, I'm doing a section at a time. Plastic cable ties can be used to supplement the clamps. I decided it was worth it to go out and get some more clamps. I've heard it said that you can never have too many clamps. I think whoever said that is absolutely right. There are some small gaps in a couple spots. I'm using Minwax stainable wood filler on those areas. Once the glue is dry, I can sand off the excess glue and putty and blend the edge molding into the shelf. I'm not going to worry about the ends yet, since some of these shelves will need to be cut shorter. That's a good place to leave things for now. Next time we'll work on finishing and installing the shelving. I'm really happy with how things are progressing so far, and I'm anxious to get to the next step. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.